Well, good morning, everybody. I wonder how many of you were up kind of late last night. If you knew you had some clear skies coming overhead, we're going to try to catch the Aurora. We had a pretty large geomagnetic storm that came through and dropped the Aurora Borealis pretty far to the south. My colleague and great friend Andrew Pritchard took this photo. This was in central Illinois. Just a rare glimpse here of seeing something like this. Now, for a lot of us, we spent time staring at the satellite imagery to see if the clouds were going to clear out, and just looking at some of the infrared satellite data. A lot of folks in through this area that could have seen the Aurora had a lot of low cloud, plus there was some fog that built in last night. But I want to take you back to Sunday and show you a couple of things we're watching this week. First of all, very large complex of storms that's moving into the Gulf of Mexico. Behind this, a lot of cold air in place and through here. We did see that there were a few prescribed burns, like right here in parts of Kansas. You can see some of the smoke coming up here. But this deep low that's still sitting here over parts of Ontario and Quebec, remember, that's the same low we talked about for most of last week that emerged in the northwest, went through Montana, and is still making its way out of the eastern side of the United States. If you notice, too, watch right here in parts of the Great Basin and the Rocky Mountains, some very deep convection in that area. I'm talking about the size of these cumuliform clouds that are in this area. But I got a few big stories that we're going to kind of follow this week, which we kind of alluded to last week. And the first is what's going on with our temperatures this morning. This is the all hazards weather map around 5:30 this morning here Central Time. And while we are watching out for snow to run down the spine of the Rocky Mountains here, we do have winter storm watches out. Notice right here along the Front Range, the air is quite cold out ahead of this. Several states with freeze warnings, freeze watches, frost advisories that stretch all the way to the Appalachian Mountains up into Pennsylvania, getting all the way down here through parts of the Tennessee Valley, covering the Ohio Valley, and back here into parts of Missouri, Kansas, Oklahoma, and Arkansas. I was just looking at what's being replaced because most of the last 30 days we've saw a real mild run of conditions in through here after Easter. And then we've had some colder air in place, but it's been met with a few warmer days, while much of the Northwest has been just locked into cold conditions, same with the Northern Plains. Well, this pattern is kind of flipped right now, and we're going to see a lot of colder air east and much more mild air to the west. This is going to be the first time in a long time that we're going to start to actually build up some heat into the Pacific Northwest where it is desperately needed. So if we take a look here at 5:30 this morning, the temperatures, we can see where that freeze line is. So we've got quite a bit of cold air right in through here. And this is going to be highly impactful on some of the crops that were able to emerge. Dropping these temperatures down to these levels, we're going to have some frost and freeze damage on a lot of the folks that were able to jump out and get early. So I think this is going to increase our replant issues here. And then to show you one other thing, on early Sunday morning, that's what this graphic is showing, we did get those temperatures in Kansas down here in the mid-20s in places. And there's just a lot of concern given how far along what we have been able to salvage of this wheat crop, where it was at. We think that any sort of freezing temperature could have done some damage. I'm not a wheat expert by any stretch of the imagination, so I'm just reporting these temperatures. I'd be curious to hear about what was seen here because of this very late freeze. So let's take a look at the next 7 days. Now this includes this morning, but everywhere in gray here is where the models are currently predicting frost over the next 7 days. I'm going to go out and show you what these overnight low temperatures are going to look like. So here's this morning. Remember, we're going to follow this white contour which represents our frost line. Getting into tomorrow morning, there's Tuesday, so throughout the Appalachian Mountains, here in eastern Kentucky, Tennessee, and then most of this side of the Ohio Valley. Then we go from Tuesday into Wednesday. We see that colder air starting to retreat a bit farther to the north. Still, several degrees colder, about 14, 15 degrees colder than normal in this area in places, while the west really starts to warm up. There's Thursday morning's lows, getting into Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. So you notice that we're not shaking this colder bias across the midsection of the country. And this is something we talked a lot about over the last 10 days, watching the west take on a ridge and the eastern half of the country seeing more routine colder weather. In terms of those high temperatures, this is Monday's highs. Getting into Tuesday, we're going to talk about this area in a few moments here. Getting into Wednesday, Thursday, look at the heat pouring into the west. This is Friday's high temperatures behind another system. There's going into the weekend, Saturday and Sunday. Now, when will we break out of this pattern? We're going to have a discussion about that, but I want to show you that over the next 7 days, this is what we're expecting in terms of total accumulated GDDs. Again, base 50, max 86. So this map is really kind of revealing what this pattern is doing, because this time of year, we do have places throughout the Midwest getting into parts of New England. I mean, this whole region is capable of adding between 90 and 120 plus GDDs this time of year, Where's all the heat? It is out in the west. So I'm going to show you what the pattern's up to, okay? And we're going to get through this week watching troughs of low pressure slide along the Rockies. This is an important one right here. This is the one that's got the colder air still locked into it. And as this right here comes through parts of Utah, Colorado, and then New Mexico, this is the one we're watching carefully to deliver some moisture. Some of it, unfortunately, snow in Colorado, but moisture through parts of Kansas, Oklahoma, Texas. And that same trough that you see right here will be pushing into the southeast. And we'll talk about later this week how this is going to deliver a lot of rain again from the mid-Atlantic down to the southeast. But what we've got here, highly amplified pattern, large ridge building into the west. That's, as a result of the heat. And then we have this trough that just keeps persistently diving through the midsection of the country. And we're out here to April 30th, going into the first week of May. And we're going to have to wait probably until we get through May 3rd or 4th, if you're in the Midwest, for this to finally clear east and return us to something that looks more like this. Now, this pattern favors more western U.S. troughs, which means California will likely come back into a little bit of a cooler regime. But this is also the kind of setup that ejects these little shortwaves off the Rocky Mountains here. It can really set up this section of the country for a lot of severe storms. It's more mild, but we're watching out for the severe storms. So this will be after the first 4 or 5 days of the month. So to see how the temperatures respond, here's the next 5 days compared to average. And this is a 5-day sliding window of average temperature anomalies. This is out there through day 5 through 10. It gets you out to the night of May the 3rd. And we keep playing out here. Notice once we get into that day, May 2nd to May 7th, we see the cooler air exiting east, some cooler air arriving in California, the ridge opening up in the mid part of the country, and that's when we start to see more mild conditions come back in. So if we keep the moisture out long enough and open up some windows here, we're going to see some very rapid planting throughout the Midwest, right in this area. I'm going to say after about May 3rd or 4th. We're going to go after it fast here. So let's talk about that. First thing, I want you to remember that with the mild conditions coming into the west, we're going to watch some snowmelt. So this is snow depth. This is just a different parameter than looking at snow accumulating. We're just looking at snow depth and how it's going to change. Now, it's very difficult, given how deep the snow is throughout the Rocky Mountains and throughout the Cascades in Sierra Nevada, to see change. But keep your eye on two different areas here and throughout the Mountain West. And I'm just going to play this relatively quickly because as we walk through this week, get into next week, a couple of things start to show up for me. There are more systems that could deliver snow to northern Minnesota, Wisconsin, the UP, maybe the Red River. All right? There it is. That's next Tuesday, Monday, Tuesday. But we do see the snowpack in the west. I'm going to play this again. Just watch the west. The snowpack is changing quickly out there. So we will start to see those snow lines move up the sides of our mountains, and we're going to get some melt out of this. As it stands, though, the forecast for rivers that will be in flood is not yet showing up in the west. So we're going to watch this all week and into next week. But we do expect along the Red River and along the Mississippi here and rivers feeding into this system, a lot of these gauges are expecting major flooding. I got to drive over up here to Dubuque, and I saw how, the Mississippi is roaring through this area. So let's keep a close eye out on the low-lying ground in here. Okay, next, here's our second big story, I guess. I don't know how many have I counted up to at this point, but this system that's coming through here, look at this corridor of wetter conditions. And why this is just critical to see the models bringing in moisture in through this area is because it's been one of the driest regions over the last month when you compare it to our history of weather data going back to 1893. So parts of Oklahoma and through here and Kansas, just in the last month, are having record dryness. The only issue is, if I showed you this from last week, we were expecting up to 1.5 inches of precip getting pretty far to the north here. So the models have backed off on this. But there is moisture coming through. Real quick, you do notice that we're expecting more precip here in the mid-Atlantic, down along the Carolinas, down into Georgia and Florida. Again, just thinking about those areas, there's been a few pockets down in Florida that still remain dry. And take a look right around, it's part of Virginia, Maryland, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, back to West Virginia, quite dry. But North Carolina's had a wet go of it over the last month, and we see more precipitation getting added to that area. This was over the weekend, the storms that ripped through here doing some severe wind damage on the backside. But as the next couple of storms come through, I think we're going to confine, not today, but tomorrow on the 25th, and then on the 26th, most of the severe threat down into this part of Texas. So let's take a look at what the high-res models have picked up on. Let's get this queued up here at about 7 o'clock this morning. So while colder air exits behind this system here, we're watching the next system gather right in through this part of the Rocky Mountains. This is by this evening. Scattered showers. Okay. Now, if we play through Monday night, there's a weak frontal boundary that stretches from Iowa into Illinois, bringing in some light showers. There's some showers expected in and around the central and southern plains on that drought-stricken ground. But here's the low that's taken form. This is the guy we're watching right here. This is why there's the winter storm watches out for the Front Range. We could be watching for snow here Tuesday night. Critical area to see some snow, but notice the rain that's curling up around this thing. Again, eastern Colorado, Kansas, Oklahoma, Texas, Arkansas. We're just bringing this moisture in, and I just hope it's a nice, good, long-lasting soaking rain in this area. We desperately need it. This goes out to midday Wednesday. To pick it up from there, let's use our multi-model analysis, GFS left, European right. So let's get you queued up. We're right about here. This is early morning Wednesday, getting through the middle of the day on Wednesday, playing out through Thursday morning. At this point, you're going to see the models try to deliver this rain across the south, and into the southeast. So here's the first big push of rain coming through Thursday night to Friday morning. And then we're going to watch this second system. It's in both models here and here, coming out of the plains that dives down. Now, GFS takes it like this. European model takes it much farther to the south. But there is a second system we're watching this weekend that curls up and moves out. So we've got to get through these next 7 to 10 days in this pattern we're currently in before we start to see things breaking away. But I want to show you a couple of maps to summarize this. This is the probability over the next 10 days of getting at least an inch of liquid. Who's off the map? The Northwest. That's the big change. This is going over drier and much hotter. And unfortunately, I do need to show you who's got the best chance at seeing some snow. We've already talked about the snow coming down the Rockies here. But I just want to make note that there's a decent probability, decent chance of picking up some snow in this area. This is the probability of 3 inches. Here's the probability of getting another inch. Okay, last thing I want to do, looking out there at week 2. You see the patterns here. We're going to discuss this in tonight's in-depth report, what's going on here between the models. And also just a quick look at South America. Most of the dryness is along the Amazon. Remember, as we move into May, May typically has about a third of the normal rainfall that April does. So this is a normal time of year that things start to dry down. But the Paraná River Basin drier. We're wetter in Buenos Aires, wetter in parts of central Brazil, and near normal precipitation for the rest of Brazil. So no major red flags here for Brazil's crop. But again, we're watching this drought continue in parts of Argentina. All right, I'll talk to you this evening. Thanks.